When I say it is of type reference, then it's nothing but the object. So dear student, suppose if I want to use output parameters in my program, then which keyword I want to use? That is nothing but out. The name remains as it is, but I'm going to modify or change the data type. And what kind of data type it is? It is float. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on methods in C#. I'm your Revati ma'am from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the topic what I have covered in my last session. So dear student, in my last session, I started with C# method parameters. So what is parameters? Here nothing but the variables. So here the values are transferred in the form of parameters. Under that, we discussed 4 different types of parameters, that is default parameter, multiple parameter. Along with that, I have discussed return value as well as named argument. Now dear student, from the examination point of view, all these topics are very important, in the sense you're going to get the question like explain C# method parameters with the type. Now in my today's session, I'm going to deal with output parameters. Along with that, I'm going to deal with variable argument list. Along with that, I'm going to deal with method overloading. Now, dear student, let's start our today's session with the topic output parameter. Now, why I required output parameter? Before that, let's discuss what is parameter. That means if I want to pass the value from calling method to called method, how I'm going to pass with the help of parameters. Under that, we discussed multiple or default parameter, named arguments, etc. Now, if I consider the output parameters, this is also one type of parameters, but it's mainly used to pass reference type. So when I say it is of type reference, then it's nothing but the object. So dear student, suppose if I want to use output parameters in my program, then which keyword I want to use? That is nothing but out. That means before any variable, I want to specify out keyword. So here out keyword is nothing but output parameters. So the out is a keyword in C#, which is used for passing the arguments to the method. It's also used to pass the arguments to the method. And what kind of arguments? It's nothing but the reference type. And it is generally used when a method returns multiple value. So dear student, there are certain time methods are able to return multiple values. And if I consider C program or Java or C++, then methods can have only one return type. That means the particular method is able to return only one value. But if I consider C# programming, this programming provides special feature called output parameters. By using output parameter, we can able to pass multiple. There is nothing but we can able to return multiple values. That means when I want to return multiple values, then I can able to use out keyword. Then This is the syntax I want to follow while defining output parameters. So what is my first statement always? That is data type along with that variable name. For example, I'll write int a. Now what is my next statement? Method name. So I want to specify any valid user defined method name, and I want to write out keyword. Along with that, I want to specify the variable name. Example, add. So here add is nothing but my method name, and I'm going to use output parameter. So it is out. Now I will write a. Now what is my next statement? That is method name out data type variable name. Example, I'll write add out. I want to specify the data type, say it is integer and a. Okay, fine. Now tell me, dear student, what is the difference between this declaration and this declaration? So dear student, this declaration is nothing but method calling. That means I'm going to call the method. Then what about my last statement? It's nothing but the method definition. That means I'm going to write complete statement within this method. So dear student, this is the way I can able to use output parameters in my program. Now let me to explain the example here. What is my first statement? Always it is using system. Now here S is capital letter because it's case sensitive programming language. Then what is my next statement? That is I want to define the class. While defining class, I'm going to use the keyword class. Along with that, I'm going to specify the class name. So what is my class name here? That is nothing but outparam. Now inside this class, I'm going to write the main method or main function. Now I'm going to define two variables, say I and j, and it's of type integer. Now I'm going to have the method called addition, and I'm going to pass the variable. So what I'm going to do here? I'm going to pass the variable, that is I and j. And what type of variable? It's nothing but the output variable. To indicate that it is reference type, I'm going to use the keyword out. At the same time, what I'm going to do? I'm going to display the a, that is I value, and I'm going to display the j value. So dear student, I repeat here that I'm going to define the variable. What are the variable? It's I and j. And I'm going to pass the variable. And what kind of variable it is? Output parameters. And I'm going to print I and j. Now I'm going to write the method body. Method body. Method body. So I'm going to make it public. That means this method is accessed throughout the class. Static. That means to invoke this method, I does not require any object. It does not return any value. And what is my method name? That is nothing but addition. And these are my output parameters. Now, I'm going to assign the value. That is P equal to 30 and Q equal to 40. Then what is the meaning of this statement? that is nothing but P equal to P plus 1. In the sense, P is 30, 30 plus 1 it is 31. That means this 31 is returned to the main function. And if I consider Q, what is Q? Q is 40 plus 1, it is 41. Then this 41 is returned to the function. So this is the way I can able to use reference type in my program. Now I'm going to have another topic of the day, that is variable arguments list. So variable, that means the argument list that is going to vary according to the programmer need. So variable in the sense what? The values are going to vary. And what kind of values are going to vary? That is, arguments are going to vary. So to make it variable arguments list in C#, I'm going to have the keyword called params. So suppose if I want to define variable length arguments, then I can able to use params keyword. So it allows the user to define as well as allows a method to accept variable. So variable number of arguments. C# params works as an array of object. So here what is list? It's nothing but the collection of element. So when it is collection of element, then it is nothing but the collection of object. In the sense, it's nothing but the array of object. To create array of object, what I am going to use, that is params. By using params keyword in a method argument definition, we can pass a number of argument. So dear student, when I want to pass variable number of arguments and it's of type array of object, then I'm going to use param. Now this is the syntax I'm going to have. So what is my function name here? That is nothing but the multiply. And to create variable argument list, I'm going to use params keyword and I'm going to create array of object. So that's nothing but collection of object. And what's the return type here? That is integer. And to invoke this function, I does not require any object. For that reason, it is static. Now, dear student, let me to consider some example. So, dear student, this is the example program. I am going to have to indicate variable argument list. As usual, I am going to write my first statement, that is using system. After that, I am going to create the class called program. Inside class, I am going to create main function, or I am going to write the main function. Now, inside the main function, I am going to call the method called multiply and I am going to pass the value 5. And whatever the return value I am going to get, that must be stored in the variable, that is multiplication value 1, and it's of type integer. See, in the second time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass 2 arguments. So as the name itself indicates that I'm going to have variable length of arguments. So here 1 argument, next time it is 2 argument, and this method is going to return some value and that is stored in the variable called multiplication 2. Now I'm going to print multiplication value 1, then I'm going to print multiplication value 2. Now dear student, I'm going to create multiply method. See here, I'm going to use params. That is nothing but I'm going to create variable argument list, and it's nothing but the collection of object or group of object. Now I'm going to define one variable called m and I'm going to assign 1. Now I'm going to repeat multiplication procedure. So I'm going to use for loop. That means I want to repeat the statement again and again. Okay, for that I'm going to use for each. It works same as for loop, but here the difference is I'm going to consider array. That means when I'm going to have the array along with array length, in that time I can able to use for each loop. Now, if I consider mul of 5, okay, that is stored in B. Okay, now I'm going to start from 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. That means 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5. Okay, so after multiplying whatever the value I'm going to get, that is returned here. So I'm going to return mul. Now, if I consider second type, that is 5, 10. So here 5, 10. So it is 5 into 6 into 7 into 8 into 9 into 10. Okay, after multiplying, that means 5 times this for each loop is going to execute. After this, whatever the final product I'm going to get, I'm going to return that into the calling method. So, these params are mainly used to define variable arguments list. Now, I'm going to have another topic, that is method overloading. So dear student, if I consider C++ programming or Java programming, we come across the topic called polymorphism. Poly in the sense what? Many. Then what about phism? There is nothing but the many form. That means for one particular method, we are going to define and we are going to write many form. For example, think myself, that is I am Revati, and I am going to handle one subject for final year B.C.A. and I am going to handle 2 subjects for 4th sem B.C.A. 4th sem B.C.A. And if I consider second sem, I am going to handle 3 subjects. So here this name is nothing but the function name. Then what about parameters? If I consider first one subject, 1 parameter. And if I consider second example, 2 subject, 2 parameters. And if I consider third example, then 3 parameters. And all the subjects are vary. So that means I can able to have different data types. Having 2 or more methods with same name but different in parameters. That means in C++, the programmer can able to write and create a method. That means 2 or more methods can have same name but different parameters. So here if I consider this example, what is the same name? That is Revati. Revati is same for all the semester. but subjects, that is handling subjects, are different. This is known as overloading in C hash. The advantages of method overloading is that it increases the readability. That means instead of writing same code again and again, what can I do? I can able to make use of same function. So that is nothing but the readability. Then the method overloading can be achieved in two ways, that is by changing number of arguments. So one method is changing number of arguments. Another one is changing data type of the arguments. So these two are very, very important. That means from the examination point of view, method overloading is very, very important. Now, I'm going to have my first type, that is C hash method overloading by using, that is by changing number of arguments. That means whatever the arguments I'm going to pass, each time I'm going to change the number of arguments. That means function name remains as it is, but while passing parameters, I'm going to vary the number. So I'm going to have my first statement, that is using system. Then I'm going to create the class called cal. Inside that, I'm going to write the method. Now I'm going to have my method. See, this method is capable to accept two variables and it's of type integer, that is integer A and integer B. After that, I'm going to add A and B and I'm going to return the value. Okay, because I have specified return type integer. Now, if I consider my second method, see here, my method name is same as my first method, but what about arguments? That is different argument. That means the length of the arguments are different. And if I consider first method, 2 arguments. If I consider second method, I'm going to have 3 variables. Now what I'm going to do? I'm going to add 3 variables and I'm going to return the value. After that, what I'm going to do? I'm going to create the class called test method overloading. In that, I'm going to create the main function and with the help of class name, I'm going to call the method. So, what is my class name here? It is cal. So, with the help of class name dot, what is my method name? That is add. And I'm going to pass the value 12 and 23. So, what is my output? It is 37. Now, if I consider second add function, it takes 3 values. Now, how I'm going to invoke that method? With the help of class dot method name. So, what is my class name? That is cal, and add is nothing but my method name, and I'm going to pass 3 value. Now, it is 37 plus 25. It is 62. It's going to display 37 as well as 62. Now, dear student, I'm going to have another type, that is by changing the data type of argument. That means I'm going to change the type of the argument. Initially, we had taken 2 same kind of arguments, that is integer. Okay, that means whatever the variable I had declared, all the variables of type integer. But here I'm going to change the data type. So as usual, I'm going to have my first statement, then I'm going to create the class. Okay, now see here. In my first function, I'm going to use integer data type. That means the type of the data here is number. That is in the sense integer, and it's also going to return integer. So I'll write a plus b. But if I consider second method, here method name is same. But what about data type? It is different. Here I am going to use floating point. So dear student, here method remains as it is. That means method name remains as it is, but I am going to modify or change the data type. And what kind of data type it is? It is float. And I am going to return the value. Now, I am going to create one more class. Inside that, I am going to create the method, that is main method. Now, I am going to pass the value. So, here it's of type integer. Directly, I can able to specify the number. To call this method, I am going to use class name dot method name. Now, if I consider this one, see, it's of type floating point. To represent it as floating point, I am going to place f at the end. Now, dear student, the question arises, how compiler is going to understand which function call for which function. There is nothing but which method call is for which method. So, dear student, at the beginning, compiler checks the method name. After that, it's going to check the parameter, that is number of parameter. Then it's going to check the type of the parameter. This is the way the compilers are responsible for identifying and differentiating methods. When same method is used more than twice in the program. So dear student, in my today's class, I started with output parameters. Along with that, I have discussed variable arguments list. Along with that, I have covered method overloading or polymorphism. So these are the certain topic I have discussed in my today's session. Now dear student, let's meet in the next session with the new concept called arrays. In that, I am going to discuss the type of an array, that is single dimensional array, multi-dimensional array and jagged array. So dear student, these are the very interesting topic. Anyway, these topics are discussed in my tomorrow's session or in my next session. So dear student, let's meet in the next session with the information about arrays. Until that, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.